Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to put back together the AOD's valve body, so full reassembly. We're going to install the Transgo shift kit. This is just the basic SK-AOD H, and we're also going to install a Sonic's boost valve. So that's, for any of these, at minimum, I like to go with this combination. So there's a lot going on with this valve body. For a single stack, it's got quite a lot of valve trains. So I'll run through them, kind of show you what parts are associated with the shift kit that are going to replace the parts that came out, and then we'll go through the procedure of putting it all back together. And then from there, I'll discuss the separator plate, talk through the orifice resizing that Transgo has you do, show you where the specific holes are, and then we'll wrap up by just putting it all back together, and then we'll be done. So the way the ATSG manual has the valve trains all tagged is by a simple numerical system. So they start with board number 1, which is going to be the manual valve, and they go all up through board 15, which is going to be your 2-3 shift and 3-2 control and 2-3 modulator valves. So starting with number 1, you have your manual valve over here, and then your little E-clip for retention. And then here you have your main throttle valve lineup, which is going to be your TV plunger, your control valve, and your boost valve and sleeve. And then here we have our 2-3 back out valve. Now in the kit, it comes with a new bore plug, a new retention clip, and a white spring. And then you obviously reuse the valve. So this is all the factory stuff we're not going to be reusing anymore. And then they also give you all new Torlon check balls, as well as a orifice along with a spring that's going to replace one of those check balls, so you'll see where that goes when we get there. And then starting in the center section here, we're going to have our orifice control valve along with a white spring from the kit, our mid-bore retention plate or retainer plate, and then here is going to be your 2-3 capacity valve. And they give you a spring to use there in place of the factory spring. Okay, this little bronze or gold colored washer is used to kind of determine, based on sizing and measurement, what spring to use. And this thing's magnetic, but basically what they have you do is see if you could fit this washer over the valve, and if so, they have you use a certain spring. If they can't, then they have you use another spring. So that's just basically how it works. Alright, so moving on down, we're going to have our 3-4 shift and our 3-4 throttle valves. No change here other than they give you a retainer clip. So you have your retainer clips on the factory on the left, and then you have your Transgo clips on the right. So here they're giving you retainer clips to use in lieu of what came off of there. Okay, it's going to be your TV limit valve, no change there. 1-2 shift, same deal, no change. And then you have your overdrive servo regulator valve. They have you install a spring in place of the factory spring, and then you reuse your plug and your retainer plate. Okay, 3-4 shuttle valve. Again, they have you use a different spring. Here is the spring that came out of the valve body. The pinkish spring is what's going to go into it. And then here is the 1-2 accumulator valve, along with all the different springs that Transgo has you install, as well as a new bore plug with an O-ring. Okay, we're going to delete this spring. We're not going to put it back in, and obviously this spring, which was broken on disassembly, so meaning that it was already broken, not that I broke it. All right, then the factory bore plug with the O-ring is not going to be reused. We're going to use the O-ring that came in the Transgo kit along with their bore plug. All right, and then lastly you have your 1-2 capacity modulator valve, and they give you an entire new valve train. So the spring, the valve, and the plug along with the retainer clip are going to be left out, and the Transgo stuff, which is here with the new retainer clip, the plug, an outboard spring, the valve itself, and an inboard spring is what is going to go into the valve body. Okay, next is going to be the boost valve and pressure regulator valve. So this is the factory boost valve lineup along with the springs. So you have your inboard spring for your boost and your outboard spring for your pressure regulator. They give you in the kit from Transgo a new PR spring to use with your spring seat and your PR valve, and then we're going to install the Sonic's boost valve in lieu of the factory boost valve and sleeve. Alright, a couple other things to note about the kit. It comes with an overdrive servo washer to use in place of, or I should say, in addition to the factory servo and cover. What that does is it kind of shortens up the travel that the servo has to make to apply the band. So I already installed the servo, but I'm going to pull it out so we can install that, and this way we can make it part of the shift kit video. So you get to see, I guess, both a factory installation if you watch the main rebuild series, and then the installation of that little fender washer that they give you as part of this video. Alright, they also give you a rubber sealing ring if you're going to reuse your third accumulator piston, whether it's plastic or whether it's aluminum. I never reuse either of them regardless of which one comes in. I always use the piston for the 4R70Ws. It's bonded steel and rubber. Alright, the instructions are available on Transgo's website. You can download them for free, so this way you can kind of pre-read if you plan on tackling this yourself, and I'll link them in the description so you don't have to go rooting for them on Transgo's site. Alright, let me reposition the camera and then we'll get started. Alright, we also have a couple of cotter pins and a drill bit, and so we'll show you what we do with them when we get to that point. Alright, there's one thing I want to do first with this valve body before we start putting valves back in, and that is to polish the bore for the throttle control valve. So if you watched that disassembly video, you would have seen that this valve, okay, this is the TV control valve, it was a little kind of sketchy coming out of the bore. I want to say it was seized, but it was not freely moving like it should have been. So if you've seen bench buddies before, this will be nothing new to you. If you haven't, basically what they are little abrasive hones. So think of them as like cylinder bore hones, except maybe, you know, much smaller. And so what you can use them for is reconditioning bores that are just a little rough around the edges that need a little bit of work. If they need major work, then you're going to have to resort to other things like reamers. But these are great if you have valves that are dragging a little bit and you just need to clean up the bore a smidge so that you can get them moving freely again. Alright, wash that stuff out. Alright, here's the valve. I want to see if I can get it to go back in its location without dragging or hanging up. Alright, now with nothing else in there, I'm going to have to use punches and other things to kind of manipulate it. It still feels a little draggy, so I'm probably going to have to work on this a little bit. And then, you know, once I'm done doing what I'm going to do, we'll resume. Because I want to make sure that I get this straightened out before I have an entire casting full of valves. So if I need to just rinse it off real quick, it's no big deal, but you can't really do that once you got everything else installed. So. The other thing you could do is also polish the lands. Okay, the design of this valve is such that it doesn't allow too much crud to build up, so it sticks. But if you inspect the valve closely, you can see some wear to it. So there's definitely some wear going on. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 800 grit sandpaper, I'm going to chuck this up in the drill, and I'm just going to go over it, you know, I don't know, maybe 15-20 seconds and then check it. Alright, I'm going to do that off camera, and then when I bring you back, we'll test fit it and see if anything's gotten any better. Anyway, so we cleaned it up a little bit with 800 grit sandpaper. So now I'm going to test fit it again and see what happens. Still a little tight, so we have a little bit of work to do, so let me do that off camera and then we'll bring you back when we're all done. Okay, after some more bore polishing, I have the control valve and the plunger along with the inboard spring back in there. And so all I'm doing here is just working the valve in the bore. Okay, it took a decent amount of bore polishing to straighten this thing out, so that can happen. I mean, these valve bodies in particular are kind of I don't want to say notorious for this, but you know, they do have their issues. Alright, now I'm going to install plunger and everything else back in. And it looks like everything is moving as it should under spring tension. Okay, then just reinstall your clip like that and you're done with that bore. And I know it looks a little unsightly, but it's not as bad as it appears when it comes to the cleanliness. Alright, so this is going to be our boost and pressure regulator valve bore here. Alright, got a little overzealous with the WD and there's been some spray over or some splatter. Let's make sure everything's in the shot. So the Sonex boost valve kits for these come with the valve and the sleeve, and that's it. Okay, they have O-rings, so you just install the O-rings and then we'll go ahead and apply a bunch of assembly lube to them. And I also like to put a little bit of transmission fluid on top of that so that they are 100% coated and there's like no risk of them breaking. Got some Cosmoline, that has to be cleaned off. Okay, inspect your valve, inspect the bore. As you can see, there's packing material in there, but you don't want any gouges or anything like that. I mean, just for the record, I've never ever seen a Sonex valve come out of the box or packaging bad, damaged, or defective. So that's always a good thing. I'm just cleaning the valve off as well. Don't want any issues there. And you could take a little bit of blue assembly lube, kind of coat the valve. Three O-ring grooves, 3 O-rings. I just want to be real careful with these because they don't give you extras in the packaging for whatever reason. Now you're going to reuse your factory clip, so keep that handy. So here's your pressure regulator spring. It came in the kit, the Transgo kit that is, and then your valve, of course. So if you want, put a little bit of assembly lube on the spring seat to keep it in position, because otherwise it'll want to come out. And go ahead and grab your shift kit spring. And there's going to be a boost valve spring as well. And it's going to be dark green in color, or olive drab green, if you will. And go ahead and lube up your O-rings again. And then just be real deliberate. And just check your O-rings as you're moving through. By the way, I know I have to take this valve train back out once it's time to install this stuff, so we're basically going to do that now. Okay, so now we're going to install these 3 valve trains. Alright, so here it's going to be our low servo modulator valve and 2-1 scheduling valve. So we're going to have the valve, okay, and then our spring, And then we're going to have our inboard retainer plate there. Just take a screwdriver that'll fit, kind of turn it vertical so that you can get the slot to kind of go, you know, between the retainer plate and it's going to be right there. So check it. Make sure it moves freely in the bore. Appears to do so, and then now go ahead and install your second valve, your spring, and then your retainer plate. Now you're going to follow the same process. I'm not gonna lie to you, there's gonna be a fair amount of editing in this video because this is a very laborious and tedious process with these things, even more so than most other Ford valve bodies. Alright, our 3/4 back out is next, and then there's a blue spring that came in the kit from Transgo, so you have your valve inboard and then your spring. And our trusty screwdriver. Okay, now we're going to do our 3 valves. This is the biggest valve train in the whole valve body. It's going to be our 2-3 shift, our 3-2 control, and our 2-3 modulator valve. So the 2-3 modulator valve is going to sit way down there. This valve can be tricky because it has to travel, and what you don't want to do is, you know, get it cocked sideways in the bore in such a way that it's stuck. All right, it's home. Now we'll put our spring. And you need to drop it straight down. I mean, I know you're not going to be able to see that, but you want to be able to drop it straight down into the bore so it just goes right onto the valve stem. All right, next. Again, the same deal. Drop it right on in. and then needs to seat in this area right here. Alright, next is going to be your, not outboard spring, but it's the spring that's most outboard, I guess. And then your final valve. And then go ahead and seat your bore plug. Okay, threaded crater or threaded port facing out toward you. Oops. Like I said, tedious. And especially if you don't do these all the time, I mean, it'll take you a little while, so just make sure you have the time allocated. Alright, so those are done. So now I can put all my throttle valve and other whatnot back in there. So I just want to get that done and out of the way. Okay, as you can see, it just goes right in, whereas before it was struggling. Alright, same with this thing. The larger stem, the fatter stem goes inboard. And just let it settle on in. And then go ahead and grab your sleeve and your little valve and spring. And then lastly, your little clip. Just don't get it caught in the glove. Okay, that was quite a lot of effort for such little progress. I mean, look how many valves we still have left to put in, and then we have to put the rest of this assembly together. All right. I shove all that stuff that we're not going to be using to the side, and then let's bring in everything that we will be installing into the shot so you can see. Actually, I'm going to switch places here. Alright, so we have our excuse me, 1-2 capacity valve, 1-2 accumulator valve, 3-4 shuttle valve, overdrive servo regulator valve, 1-2 shift valve, our TV limit, and then our 3-4 shift and 3-4 throttle, and then we have our orifice control and 2-3 capacity valves. So that rounds out all these valve trains. Alright, sorry, I have to reach across occasionally. Alright, so let's start with our capacity valve for our 1-2. See if there's a better way to do this. Alright, this might be a little bit better, less of me reaching across, obscuring the shot. So here's the valve and the spring that came in the kit. So we're just going to start over here. Alright, when you have a spring inboard and then the valve, just kind of stroke it like this multiple times. Make sure it's good to go. And then they have you install this other spring here. And then the plug, and like all these plugs, you want the threads facing you. Okay, 1-2 accumulator. So again, we're going to delete the inboard spring, and then of course the 2 halves of the outboard spring. So we're just going to go with our accumulator. And this one also is a little sketchy coming out. Let's see how it is going in. That's sketchy. Alright, after a little bit of off-camera bore polishing, I think I got this thing to where it needs to be. So you should be able to install it and remove it with a pair of regular snap ring pliers without any issue at all. It was pretty much seized in the bore when I tried to put it in there initially, so. Alright, there it goes. Now what they have you do is they have you install this O-ring on this plug, and in the instructions it's not entirely clear as far as which way it should go. In fact, let me show them to you. So here's the accumulator valve train, and here are the 3 springs, and then here is where they have you install the O-ring, and it says, you know, clip in the middle groove, only install seal in the outboard groove. Okay, the flat end, which appears to be going inboard. However, if the small end of the accumulator valve does not have a hole for a spring, install the flat end of the plug into the valve body. So they're having you do that no matter what. Whether it has a spring or not. So I'm going to go ahead and lube this up, and then we'll lube up our entryway here in the bore. And then I'm going to install the 3 springs. So we're ready with our little clip. Appears fine. So just keep that in mind when you read those instructions. Okay, let's see if we can make some a little bit better progress here. This is the O-ring that came in the main overhaul kit for this board plug here on the accumulator that we're not reinstalling. I'm just going to put all my other stuff, springs and plugs and other whatnot that's not going back in on that other towel. Okay, we're not putting that back in. We're not putting that back in. And we're not putting this back in. So spring then valve. Spring could be caught up. There we go. And then our bore plug. Alright. Progress is very slow, but sometimes that's how it is. The valve bodies in general. And we're not going to reuse that. We are going to reuse this. Okay, 1-2 shift, spring and then valve. I'm going to check our valve. I may have pushed that in a little bit too far initially when I installed it, but we'll kind of flag this and come back to it if it's, you know, still acting like that later. All right, next is CV limit. So valve first, then spring. All right, we'll use a screwdriver method. All right, so now we're going to do our 3/4 shift and throttle valves. All right, just want to make sure I'm all bottomed out. So this spring goes around that other one. Yeah, just make sure this valve is moving freely in its location. And you have your sleeve and your little valve. Just going to use some assembly lube to hold it in place. And then Transgo gives you a new clip to use. If you want, you can just use a screwdriver to kind of block this valve inboard if you can get access to it here. Okay. Like that. All right, last but not least, we have orifice control and 2-3 capacity valves. Okay, another retainer plate inboard. And then we have the Transgo spring. Get rid of this other stuff. Okay, all bottomed out. Just want to make sure that you're in the shot. Let's see what I'm doing. Now, this particular retainer plate is the longest plate in the valve body, so it's kind of hard to mix it up, or if you do, and you're not sure where it goes right here. This valve feels a little gamey. I'm going to polish this up a little bit, the valve itself, and then I'll put it back. That looks a little better, so let's give it a whirl. Okay, when you can start moving it, here I'm moving it against the inboard retainer. Alright, you can see it move a little bit more freely. We got a lot of the scratching off of it, if not all of it. So we'll go ahead and install the spring and the little bore plug, and we'll use the Transgo retainer. Alright, this has a lot of spring tension on it now. So it looks like the valve itself is moving freely enough. So what I'm doing is just simply taking a little screwdriver and just moving it against spring tension. Seems okay. Alright, one last valve. Other than the manual valve, so two last valves. So this is going to be our 2-3 back out. And Transgo gives you basically a whole new valve train other than the valve itself. So you got a new spring, and you got a new plug, and a new little clip. Alright, I'm going to install this and I'm going to check it, because if it's dragging a little bit, I'm going to deal with it. Alright, so you want to compress this until you get that groove exposed. It's going to be difficult to see this, but it is sitting a hair below flush. Yep, it is a hair below flush. A hair. So I can get in behind this thing. There we go. Ah. Okay, I'm not feeling any drag. All right, I'm gonna check that 1-2 valve real quick. That's this valve right here. Yeah, it looks like it might be all right. Put that plug back in. Not that it's going to come flying out, but still. It seems to be returning against spring tension like it should, so I don't think that we have to pull it out for any reason. Alright, the last but not least is our manual valve. And we are done with the valve train portion of the assembly process. So as you can see, it's been quite an adventure. So this thing just goes right here. If only they were all that easy. Alright, let me check this battery and then we'll reset and finish this thing up. I'll go over the spacer plate and all the different orifice sizing that they have you do. And that'll be that. We'll put it back together and then it'll be ready to be bolted onto the transmission once we get to that point. Alright, so I have my holes drilled here. See if I can get the glare out of the way, but I don't know if I'll be able to. Anyway, holes C, B, E, and K, which are labeled here in the instructions. They're all to be drilled to 55 thousandths, and basically if one of them is larger, they have you peen it shut using a little check ball hammer, and like they're telling you to use an old Sprag race. Peen it shut, then drill it to 55 thousandths. This hole right here, 86 to 93, I drilled at 86, and this hole is to be drilled to 86 to 93 thousandths as well. This happens to already be 86 thousandths, which somebody probably drilled that out, you know, the guy that did the work on this previously. Alright, so here's a close-up of the instructions. Again, they're downloadable off of Transgo's website for free, and you can check them out there. Alright, now we're going to flip the valve body back over so that we can follow the rest of the instructions and install our check balls. So here's where they're going to have you install the little orifice cap and spring. So the spring's going to go in first, and the cap. And it's going to be in this location right here. Alright, then the rest of your check balls are going to install no different than the factories. There's your big check ball, and then the rest of them will go into their designated locations. And you're not supposed to put a ball here, so I'm going to take that ball out. Now you're not supposed to put a ball there either. Alright, then we have our converter relief. This little valve here. Okay, this has a light blue spring. That goes there. And then this is going to be your TV relief or throttle relief. So we have a total of, looks like 6 check balls plus this, so 7 total if you count this. So the big one, here, 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 and here. I'm going to skip over this, and we got our 2 relief valves and springs in place, so we should be good. Alright, the next thing they have you do is install the little gold colored cotter pin in this location. It's hole C on the plate. And they have you install it here on what is basically the separator plate, the case gasket. So I'm going to see if I can lift this up without ripping it. Maybe not, but it's hole C. That's what they want you to do. The other cotter pin is for making, like, you know, adjustments to your accumulator valve if you want to put different springs in there. I never do that. I never found it to be necessary. Alright, so we want to put our valve body to plate gasket on. Okay. And this location here for this bolt and this bolt are what we refer to as our Z-bolt locations, and they're marked on the instructions. That's where you're going to align everything. So I don't know if there's like special tools or alignment dowels or whatever, but I like to use bolts. So these are just the valve body to case bolts. Okay, then we have our reinforcement plate. Now, all of the reinforcement plates and the valve body to plate bolts, and which there really technically is only one, they're all going to get 100 inch-pounds. All right, just 100 inch-pounds. So this is the one quote-unquote valve body to separator plate bolt. And it takes 8 millimeter, and then the rest of them are 10 millimeter. Okay, so this one, you just want to clock it so that you have your orifice here, and then you have your two hole locations. So the orifice in the reinforcement plate should align with the orifice in the valve body, and then the separator plate. And your next one's going to be your largest one. This here has to face inboard. Now this little channel. So it's going to go here and here. And your last plate, you also have two channels. So you have to line them up accordingly. So you want to make sure that they are over their requisite orifices. A notch is going to be in this direction. It's going to be facing or pointing at the lower right hand corner of this location here, this big square cutout. So, you know, think of it like Pac-Man. It's chomping at the corners. So all these bolts get 100 inch-pounds, and then the valve body to case bolts also get 100 inch-pounds. Now you just want to check your other bolts, make sure none are like seized up or stuck. If not, then zip that last bolt down and we'll torque everything up. Tricky, you don't want to obviously mar up the gasket, tear it or whatever, so just be careful. And I think the book does recommend that you go in increments. So I generally will, and I'm just looking at the gauge, digital readout to see where I'm at as I'm working up the torque. If you have a click style torque wrench, and I'll check before I close this segment, but if you have a click style torque wrench, then you'll probably want to actually set it to intermediate increments before you go to full torque. Now I'm just going half and half. So 50 to 55 inch-pounds and then 100. Alright, we're going to get our bolts out of the way. Now this bolt might be a little tricky going into the case, but as long as we're not really scraping hard against it, it should be okay. Alright, this valve body's all done. Okay, the very last step we need to take with respect to the installation of the Transgo AOD shift kit is to install this fender washer that comes in the kit over top the overdrive servo piston. So it sits between the piston and the cover, and it tightens up your band clearance so that you have a crisper 3/4 upshift. So what you see here is the back end of a 4L60E detent roller, and it's jammed all the way into this location to hold the band in place so that you can do what you need to do with the servo. Now this is especially important if you're installing this shift kit while the transmission's still in the vehicle. If you do not do something to keep that band in place, as soon as you take your servo out, the band's going to retreat further into the case and you'll never be able to get it back to re-engage it with the servo pin, because the only thing keeping it on the pin is the pin itself. So you need something, it doesn't matter what it is as long as it works and it doesn't do any damage, but you need something to keep that band in place. So what we'll do is we're just going to install the servo, I guess the shim, the fender washer, and the dimensions are as follows. It's 205 thousandths inch wide. It's got a 902 thousandths inner diameter, and it's 100 thousandths thick. So just install it. Okay, make sure it's in there. And then go ahead and reinstall your piston. Make sure that your bore and your sealing rings are adequately lubed. Alright, the next thing we need to do is compress this all the way in so that we can reinstall the snap ring. So I'm using a Kent Moore tool. It's a J35739-3. And I'm going to stand on the engine stand itself and compress this in. And I need to work the snap ring into the bore so that I can reinstall it. Okay? I'm going to check my band. And this could be tricky even with the transmission out of the vehicle like this. Even with it on the bench or on the stand. Because you got to get this snap ring started. And once you have it started, the rest is fairly easy. But it will want to fight you. Alright, now we're going to withdraw the detent roller. And we need to make sure that we have some band clearance. So I'm going to turn the case around, and then we'll take a screwdriver and we'll wiggle the band back and forth. And basically what Transgo tells you is they want to see at least a 1/16 of an inch of movement in that band. Alright, so let me reposition the camera and then we'll take a look at it from the rooster cone's point of view. So there's the band right there. So I'm just going to take a screwdriver and see if I can move it. Okay, I do have band clearance. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom back out. I'm going to reattach my test plate and I'm going to air check this servo to make sure that that band is applying. Because like I said, this is kind of a risky procedure to do with the trans either in the vehicle or otherwise fully assembled like this. We have the pump in, the case is fully assembled, and then we had to go back in because, well, frankly, we had to go back in because I wanted to film the segment separately from the main reassembly series. So anyway, let me go ahead and get the air plate bolted, and we'll go ahead and we'll do a quick air check. Alright, we have the air test bolted to the plate, so this is going to be our overdrive servo's band apply, and all we're going to do is take a finger or two, just kind of stick it on the band, and what we want to feel is that band move when we put air into this servo feed. Okay, I know you can't see it, but that band is moving. Let me see if I can put a light on it and make a mark. Alright, I'll zoom in. Alright, you see the mark I made? So now we're going to go ahead and put air into our band apply. And we should see that mark move. Alright, we have good band apply, and we know that we are engaged. The servo pin is on the band anchor location for the servo, and we are at no risk of having a neutral in fourth condition, because that's what would happen if you were not able to re-engage your band with the servo pin. You'd have an upshift and then you'd feel like you're in neutral. So for all AOD, AODE, 4R70, 75W equipped vehicles, if you want to install a shift kit or swap the servo out or replace the servo, you're going to be confronted with this issue. So detent rollers for 4L60Es or 700R4s, it's the same part, are pretty much everywhere. So with that tool, just wedge it in there, you know, make sure that your band is secured. You can then service the overdrive servo, replace the seals, put a better servo in there, whatever you want to do, and not have to worry about the band retreating deep into the case. because otherwise, if you're not able to reacquire that band or hold it fast, you're going to have to take the transmission out and take it halfway apart just to re-engage the band. And let's face it, that would suck if you're doing this with the transmission otherwise healthy in the vehicle. So anyway, this particular segment is going to be a part of the valve body assembly video. So if you're watching this as the standalone portion and you want to know how the rest of the kit goes into the valve body, go ahead, check that video out. If you want to know how to install the different parts that go into the accumulator bores, I mean, it's just a couple springs, but you can check out the assembly series where toward the end of it I show that as well. Anyway, I hope this helped you. If you have any questions, comments, go ahead and leave them below. If there's anything else you want me to do specific to these transmissions, whether it be the AOD through the 4R75W, just leave it in the comments and I'll prioritize it for a future video. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Appreciate it, and we will see you on the next one. Take care.